So our next item that we are turning our attention to is on income tax withholding. And that's Chapter 4. We're going to take a couple days to go through this. There's, as in the last chapter, there's a lot of sort of introduction and overview, and then we jump into the calculations. There's some complexities that we're going to be introduced to in this chapter in that, and we've already skirted around the issue a little bit. Some items that are taken out of our paychecks are not susceptible to federal income tax. Does anybody remember any of those things that maybe you can have held out of your paycheck? It is. It's your 401k. We're also going to learn about things called health savings accounts. They kind of work like a 401k where you have money taken out and put into, it's really like an IRA for medical costs. We're going to talk about flex plans. So there's a number of different things, and then we're going to get into the numbers of it, and it's not hard, but there's all this stuff. There's a number of steps that you just have to follow. So let's start by just basically taking a look at what income tax withholding is. I'm going to pop through these. So again, this is not to beat a dead horse, but we're not even talking about this unless we've got a proper employee-employer relationship. So if I've got somebody that's an independent contractor, am I worrying about this at all? No, there's got to be an actual employee-employer relationship. Oh, and let's just go back and one more time. What are the three categories I look at? Behavioral control, financial control, perceived relationship. Exactly, those are the three categories. That's why they're saying see Chapter 3. We've already talked about this. Then there's this thing called statutory non-employees. And whenever you see the word statutory, does anyone know what that means? That's your business law. It means that it's not a common law thing. There's an actual statute or law written at the state or federal level, right? So statutory non-employers, in other words, it's written right into the law, are people that are directly selling products, qualified real estate agents. They aren't employees, and they don't have federal income tax withheld. That means there's probably been a lawsuit that culminated in some sort of statute actually being written about it. So obviously, just like with FICA, we start when we're trying to figure out what we're paying federal income taxes on. We start by looking at somebody's gross wages, and that's our jumping off point, and then we add and subtract from there. So wages and salaries, clearly. Vacation pay, taxable for federal income taxes. Supplemental payments, we need to spend a second here because this is the first time you've heard that term, and we're going to be working with that pretty significantly. So supplemental payments is anything that doesn't really fit into these categories. So it's something like severance pay or retroactive pay. What the heck does that mean? Yeah, back pay. Like here, our year starts July 1st, our calendar year, but we oftentimes don't sign our contract with the union until now. And so maybe we were supposed to get a 2% raise starting last July. So then we'll get a supplemental payment for that 2% we were supposed to make the last 9 months. Okay? Get to go out for pizza on Friday night. So supplemental payments are treated differently for federal income tax purposes. Severance pay, retroactive pay, those are kind of the two biggies. Cash, I'm not going to quick get into that yet. So let's just leave it at that they're these special kinds of payments, and they're treated differently for federal income tax purposes. Bonuses and commissions, and then taxable fringe benefits. And I think we started talking about taxable fringe benefits. It's okay. Taxable fringe benefits last chapter. Does anybody remember any of them that we talked about? Mm-hmm. Personal use of a corporate car, absolutely. Meals, if they're for the
employer's benefit.
they're taxable if it's for the employee's benefit, right? Because then it's a benefit to you, right? If I'm doing it, if I'm the employer and I'm doing it because I need you to stay on premises, then it's not going to be taxable to you. But if I think the example I gave was a lot of these big campuses in Northern Cal, like Google and Facebook, they've got, 4-star chefs in their company cafeteria, and you swipe when you go through, you're eating a $25 organic lunch every day. Those are taxable way. That's for your benefit, isn't it? It's a gift to you. It's a recruiting tool. Anything else that you guys remember that we talked about? I can't even remember what we all talked about. Did we talk about educational assistance? Wait, where's the fringe benefits? See next slide. Never mind. I guess we'll just talk about them. So both of those things we just said, meals and entertainment, personal use of a corporate car. Here's another one, and stick with me here. So if I buy you a life insurance policy and the face value is up to $50,000, you don't have to pay tax on the premiums. What did I just say? What's the face value? What does that mean? If you worked for me, Amber, and I paid for premiums on a life insurance policy, and the face value on it was under $50,000, if you died, your partner or your daughter would get the face value. If I'm buying you all a policy under $50,000, is that because I think that's going to take care of your families forever? No, that would be silly. You'd need a lot more than that. What am I hoping to cover by buying you a policy of, say, 20, 30 grand? What are your final costs? Final costs on average around about $25,000. Okay. So if I buy you a life insurance policy like that, you don't have to pay taxes on the premiums. What if I pick out one person, I pick out Kelly, and I buy him $1 million policy? Then the premiums are going to show up and he's going to have to pay tax on them on his W-2. I'm doing that for him because that's one of the things he demanded to come to work for my company. I want a life insurance policy that if I die, my family's actually going to have money to be taken care of forever. I want $1 million face value. So I'm probably coughing up 10, 15 grand a year in premiums for him. That's going to show up on his W-2. That's a taxable fringe benefit. What if I buy you all this little policy at 20, 25 grand? Not taxable. What about if I pay your medical premiums? Are those taxable benefits? No. And that's one of the big things in the ACA with Obamacare. They did not, it's so highly desirable. In fact, now you have to, if you're an employer and have more than 50 employees, you have to buy health insurance offer health insurance for your employees. So it's not taxable. Okay, what other kinds of things are? Tips, obviously we know that. We've done some work with that. What's an example of a cash award? You guys ever get cash awards when you go to work? Me either. But it would be things like cash awards are if you've been here 20 years and you can get a Rolex watch or a $10,000 check, or trips. What if you win trips at work, like for selling X amount above your quota? Is that taxable? It is. That shows up. And people don't actually realize that. Like, oh, I just want a trip to Miami for 5 days. And it's like, then you get your W-2 at the end of the year. You're like, why the hell do I owe taxes? Well, because there's a $5,000 trip that shows up on your W-2 that you didn't have any withholding on. Okay, so it's not really a free trip. Absolutely taxable. Absolutely taxable. People just don't realize that. Any sorts of prizes or awards like that are all taxable. Really, the only exception is if it's like under $400 or under $1,600 and you have a qualified plan and it's for length of service or safety. I mean, there's a couple little exceptions in the Internal Revenue Code, but on the whole, True story, my mother-in-law was a director of a low-income daycare of the board of directors for a volunteer gig in Pennsylvania, and she got a friend of hers to donate an RV, and they raffled it off, and the family that won the RV got 1099 at the end of the year, for $29,000. Yeah, I mean, that's a $3,500 tax bill, and they were a low-income family. They had to sell the RV to pay the tax. So, I mean, you just kind of have to be aware of those things. Nothing super important here. A lot of people don't realize this, that with scholarships, if you get a scholarship that goes directly just to reducing your tuition bill, no big deal. But if you've got to do anything for that scholarship, like show up in a research lab or TA or do workers, what's it called when students work on campus? Work study, anything like that that's tied to getting money, then it is compensation and it's taxable. So an outright scholarship here, you just get the money, not taxable. But if you've got to do anything in return for that, mentor somebody else or, whatever, then it's taxable. Unemployment, a lot of people don't realize that. Unemployment insurance is taxable, right? So if you get unemployment and you don't get federal income tax taken out of it, you're going to probably have a little surprise at the end of the year. You're going to go, oh, income tax on it.
Yeah, I did that already once. I forgot to click the button that have withdrawn and
Right. I mean, it's just, it's kind of like, it's back to the old adage, you've got to take, 4 years of science and 4 years of English and in high school. And yet you get out and people don't know how to read a lease or what their rights are as a tenant or how to deal with income taxes or what does it mean to have a copay with your first, health insurance plan. It seems like there's so many basic things that somehow our young people are just, missing. And if you don't have parents or peers or mentors that can kind of help you sort those things out, and then you fast forward another 5 or 7 years, and now you're talking about things like having kids, maybe buying your first house, making really big decisions on careers, and nobody's ever given you any tools how to make those decisions. I mean, you don't just wake up with them one day. So anyways, I try as much as I can in here to just share, what I know. Oh, here's the next slide that was supposed to be back there. So we've talked about some of these: personal use of a corporate car, athletic club membership. So if they pay for you to join a country club or a gym or a polo club or whatever, that's taxable. Tickets to athletic events, again, around here, probably not a big deal. The Grizz is about as big as it gets. But if you worked in LA and you got Lakers season tickets, I mean, that would show up, $25,000, I'm guessing, probably on your W-2, right? So they're not free. Frequent flyer miles, this is on the books that's taxable. So I'm an executive, I fly all over the country. End of the year, I got a couple 100,000 miles. Technically, that's taxable income because I can use it however I want. But their IRS has found no way to track that. And people are like, I'm not going to report, I'm not going to pay tax on it. So that it's on the books that it's taxable, but it isn't really in real life. Does anyone know what a stock option is? Is the stock option the same as actual stock? Like here's a share of Microsoft stock? It's actually not. It's an option to buy stock at a certain price. Why would you want? Huh? Yeah, sure. So let's see. Who's publicly traded in Missoula? Republic Service, the guys that pick up our trash, right? If they gave me stock options, if I managed the BFI here, and they gave me options to buy stock at $50 a share, what's the first question you want to ask me about that? So, and again, is an option the actual share of stock? No. It's a certificate that says, you can, it's called an exercise price. You can buy the stock at 50 and an eighth. right? And they give me, say, 1,000 of those. Are those beneficial to me? You gotta ask me a question. What's the stock trading at? Well, today, say they're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. I go in, and they're trading at 59 3/8. Is that beneficial to me? Sure, because I can take my piece of paper and $50.125 and buy a share of stock and turn around and sell it and make $8.50 on each share. Like that, can I? Okay? So that's beneficial. But they're not going to generally give you options that look like that. They're going to give you options that look like the trade price today is 42 7/8. Why do I want these stinking things? I can go pay more for them? Why does a company do that? Especially to its management team. What are they trying to get you to do? Figure out how to make the company more profitable and more attractive and get the price up over 50 1/8 so they become beneficial to you. Now, that's great. Incentivizing is always a powerful tool. What we have found, however, and one of the things, I mean, I'm not going to go into it. Has anybody seen The Big Short, the movie on what happened in the recession? Huh?
Not yet.
Go see it. It's phenomenal. It just leaves you going, oh my God, we don't have a chance. But what it does a lot of times is it incents people to do things that aren't in the best interest of the company in the long term to get their own short-term reward. So like say I'm the accountant and I'm like, I can go into it in detail, but I can manipulate some things to make things look different in the short term or look beneficial in the short term so I can get the stock price up, I can cash in my options, but it might not really be making good decisions in the long term for the company. So, I mean, they really can work both ways. And also, a lot of times they're never even worth the paper they're printed on because you never get the stock with it, right? But if you have stock options and you exercise them and you make money, then that's a taxable fringe benefit. What's specifically excluded? Qualified employee discounts. So if you work for a company and you get 20% off, everything that they have, you don't have to pay tax on that. If they reduce your tuition or pay meals or pay lodging, if it's for the employer's benefit, don't have to pay tax. De minimis fringe benefit, that's de minimis is Latin for little or minimal amount. And that's like if they give you something like, here we provide you with a cell phone and you can also use that for personal use. It's so small they're not going to track it. You don't get taxed on it. Or everybody gets, a turkey at Thanksgiving. I mean, it's not like, the $22 turkey is going to show up on your W-2. It's too small to track. And then there's a complete list in the book. Okay, so how do you take tax out of these fringe benefits? So let's go back to the example. And again, they're not huge numbers in Missoula, Montana, like, I don't know, I think it's $5,000 a year to belong to Missoula Country Club. But if you go to Pebble Beach, you're going to pay $70,000 a year to belong there, right? So how does your employer get tax out of your fringe benefit? Because it's not a paycheck thing, is it? So you can do a couple things. Let's just walk through them. This can get a little convoluted. So the first thing it says, you can withhold just like you would supplemental wages, flat 25%. So again, those supplemental wages are things like your retro pay and your severance pay. That's one way to withhold federal income tax on those. The rate is 25% for federal income tax, 3% for state income tax in Montana. Just a flat amount. So, or you can say, oh my gosh, I'm going to take the value of that country club membership and add it to my regular paycheck and then go to the tables and look up the federal income tax based on that bigger amount. But I'm not going to put $70,000 all on one paycheck. So you can split it up. You can be as flexible as you want. You can treat the benefits as being paid on one or more dates in the same calendar year. So I'm going to probably take that 70 grand and say if I'm getting the benefit of belonging to Pebble Beach, take that 70 grand, divide it by my, 24 paychecks in a year, and tack that amount on to each check before you go figure out the taxes. Because if you put 70 grand all in one check, you're obviously going to pay your whole paycheck over an income tax. Do you have questions about how this works? I don't know if I have an example. Oh, here it is. So for example, if you have an entire $2,000 value of country club memberships, you can put that all on one check, or you can add $500 on each of 4 checks. Yeah, so it's totally flexible. You can do whatever you want to do, and the employer's got to help you make that happen. Okay, back to tips. Let's do our quick refresher just one more time on this. Let's do our example that I sold $48,800 worth of liquor last month, and I declared tips of $2,500, and now you're running. So say this all happened in May. Now you're running paycheck on June 15th, 7 times 80 for $537.28 is my gross. Where do I start to work through this? What do I need to think about? What do I need to check? What do I need to verify?
You need to start by verifying that your reported tips are the 8% of your.
Yeah, I checked that. Why don't you check and see, are they? Oh, she's making us get out our calculators. You guys are all like grown. So I don't think that my bartender reported 8%. How much should he have reported? 3,000. Should have reported 904. Okay, and he reported 2,500. The difference is something called what? Yeah. Okay, so we've been through this a couple times, so there's all my data. So now I'm running my paycheck. What do I do? Figure out the FICA on my paycheck. How much should I be taking out for FICA, do you think? What do you think, Bo? This is my gross, right? How much? We'll just keep guessing numbers until we get close to mine.
What did he make so far?
This is his gross paycheck. That's a good question. What has he made so far? But he hasn't capped.
Oh, well, I just.
Times what? How are you going to get the FICA out of his tips? It is 235.11. $2,500 plus 573.28 times, right? 7.65. You know that. Now, there's a couple things that are worth repeating. One is, did I put reported or allocated tips in this calculation? Reported. Do I take FICA out on allocated tips? No. The reason we're going through all this and how I'm going to tie it into this chapter is what we did here is exactly the same thing we're going to do for FIT. You don't know how to calculate FIT yet, but when we go do it, are you going to calculate it on 573 or 3,073.28? 3,073.28. The only place an employer has to get your taxes is out of what? Your paycheck. It's not like you're going to come in every night with your, $200 you made behind the bar and pay your taxes, right? So you don't add the $2,500 on and pay it to them again, but you've got to put it in the calculations, and that's tricky. Now, the other thing is, what do we do with these guys? What do we do with the allocated tips of $1,404? It shows up on the W-2, and you're going to have to, the employee's going to have to pay for it on his or her own, right? Remember that? So the point of that whole review is to walk into this, which is basically, employer must withhold FIT and FICA based on this information, the amount that you tell them. I've got to give you my tips by the 10th of each month. The employer is not required to withhold unallocated tips, only reported tips. We learned this rule last chapter. I'm just saying the exact same thing. We're talking about a different tax, but it's the same rule. What if the amount that I'm supposed to withhold is greater than the paycheck? So, for example, here, how much do you have to make as a tipped employee per hour? Minimum wage in Montana, $8.05. Our minimum wage is higher than federal minimum wage, right? But if you go to Nevada, how much do you get paid an hour as a bartender? $2.13. So what happens when you're a blackjack dealer, which is a tipped employee, right, and you make $2,000 in a week? Is your paycheck of $85.20 going to absorb your taxes? No, not even close. What do? In that situation, my blackjack dealer gets no paycheck. The employer is going to withhold what they can out of the $85.20. And then it's going to be up to her to pay quarterly estimated taxes. And if you're making $2,000 a week, 8 times 12, you're making almost $100,000 a year. You better have a system for saving your taxes and getting it to the IRS, right? And most of the big casinos have like on-site accountants that help people because I mean it's not. I mean I think it's easy because they know how to do it, but it's not easy if you don't know how to do it, and you can get in a lot of trouble if you don't do it correctly. And then it says here she can pay the balance when she files her 1040 tax return. That's true, but you're going to have penalties if you've underpaid during the year. Right? So it's not like you can't pay all year and then write a check for $30,000. Because you and I can't do that. We have to pay every week, don't we, with our paycheck. So why is it fair that you get to save your money all year and turn it in at one time? You have questions about how this works? The tips are a lot more complicated than they look. Traveling expenses. Okay, but there's one thing that I want you to remember, and I've already said this to you once, but we're going to go back and review it about travel. Is your first question to your employer is, do you have an accountable plan? What this means is, let's say I go and demo MRI machines around to major urban hospitals in the Northwest. So I'm on the road 250 days a year. I've got my, brand new SUV that they give me to drive around in. I mean, that's a pretty good job. I'm selling $2 million machines. And I use my credit card for my travel, and then I give them the receipts once a month. And they write me some pretty sizable checks because I'm staying in nice hotels, and I'm eating out, and I'm entertaining doctors, and blah, blah, blah. Is that money that they give me for reimbursements includable in my W-2? What do you think? Should it be? Is that a benefit to me? Yeah, I mean, it just X's out to me, doesn't it? I spend money, and then they give me the money, and it all nets out to zero in my life, right? The only possible benefit is, if I've got a mileage credit card, I'm accruing miles or something. It's not a benefit if I end up not giving my money on time and have to pay interest. But basically, I'm doing the company a favor by using my credit card, right? So if you have an accountable plan, then those reimbursements don't show up on your W-2. An accountable plan means that the company, the employer, has a plan that's compliant with the Internal Revenue Code. Written plan. Here's my policy. If my employees use their own credit cards to travel, they've got 10 days to bring me the receipts. Each receipt has to contain the name of what was the business purpose, who did they meet with, da-da-da-da-da. It's all the documentation required by the Internal Revenue Code. If I don't have a plan in place in my company that says all the rules and policies and stuff, then it's called a non-accountable plan, which means there isn't a plan. And then all that reimbursement they gave me is considered wages and shows up on my W-2. Does that hit you how profound that is? So if I'm traveling and entertaining docs and traveling 250 days a year, I probably have $40,000 in out-of-pocket expenditures that are reimbursed by my employer. You want that on your W-2? No. So this is a little above our scope, but I mean, it shows up on your W-2, then you get to actually write it off on your tax return, but it goes on your Schedule A, and if you don't file a Schedule A, you don't get it at all. My point is with all this is that here in the middle it says an accountable plan is an IRS approved plan. It's got to meet 3 rules. If you go to work for somebody and one of the situations is you're going to be traveling and using your own card or your own cash and then getting reimbursed at the end, you want to make sure they have an accountable plan. Because if they don't, you're going to end up with income on your W-2. Okay. You have questions?
Yeah, for the accountable plan for the employer, how does it?
That's a business. No, that's a business expense for them.
No, how do they even set up the accountable plan?
You can Google it.
Okay.
It's a form. And then you take it to your next board of directors meetings and you say, does anybody have a motion to adopt an accountable plan? And I say, I first it, and you say, I second it, and we all read it, and we stamp it, we put it in the corporate minutes, and now we have an accountable plan. It's that easy. But it's another one of those things, if I've never heard what it is,
Yeah, you're-
how do I know to go get one?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, what's exempt from FIT? In other words, what don't I have to pay federal income tax on? Did you know that if you're a minister, you're exempt from federal income tax? Advances. So I go to my employer. I go, and actually this has gone through the courts. I even remember when I was younger, I think it was either in Rolling Stone or Motherlode or one of those kind of hippie magazines, 18 or 19. You could go in the back and get a minister's license. You could apply for one and get it, online. Well, it wasn't online back then. I mean, you get it through the mail for $10. This is what people were trying to do. Now it's going to court. You actually have to have a congregation. You have to have somebody that follows you and worships through you or whatever. Yeah, exactly. How many people? Like one? Like my wife? I mean, sure. So in advances, that's like if you go to your employer and say, oh my gosh, my transmission just went out. Can you loan me $3,000 and then I'll pay you back $200 a check for the next year? And your employer says, sure. That's really, they're just lending you money against your check. So that's not taxable when they cut you the check to pay for your transmission. Educational assistance. If your employer helps you up to $5,250 a year to attain education that's going to improve your job status or maintain your job status, that's tax-free. Okay? But if it's something like law school, or it's going to qualify you to do a whole nother job, then that's taxable. So, like we get free education at the university as being a professor here. But it's got to be something that's related to what you're already in. At one point I was thinking I was going to try and do law school, and that would have ended up being taxable because it would, even though I wasn't intending to go become a full-time attorney afterwards, I just wanted it for some other reasons, it qualified me to do something else. So then all of a sudden I was going to have like $15,000 a year showing up on my W-2, right? Because of the cost of law school. So be careful with that. I know you work for an employer that's got this, and like what kinds of things would you go to school to that would improve your job at DirecTV, like business classes?
Yeah. Like e-commerce or like.
Oh, okay.
In the HR department.
Ah, okay. Okay.
We have to get pre-approved to know before we go to school. We know ahead of time.
Does DTV only pay for things to improve your job status? If you wanted to go become a forensic anthropologist, would they pay for it? No, it has to directly relate to the company itself. Yeah, so that's also another thing worth knowing. That's the other thing I think is interesting. A lot of young people have no idea like what some of the benefits really mean. What are these things? So that's.
Do you get tuition reimbursement after you've already graduated? If you went to school while you were working for a company?
Policies are really different depending on companies. Like some companies will, just flat out actually write the check to the university for you. Some you have to prepay it and then show them you got a, 3.0 or whatever, and then you get reimbursed a percentage of that after the fact. Some make you go so far as, if they really want you to say get a certificate or an associate's, you have to get all the way there before you get your money. So it depends upon what the company's policy looks like. What does y'all's look like?
We get reimbursed after you give your grades, and after 60 days you get reimbursed.
So you prepay it, you go through the whole semester, submit grades. So you have to carry it for probably 7 or 8 months on your credit card or your loan or whatever. Yeah. Go ahead.
Then do most of the time, do they have some kind of thing saying that you have to stay with them a certain amount of time?
There-
Or
You
can
can.
they say that?
Ours, we have to work at least a year afterwards, otherwise we have to pay back. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. So again,
Really? Okay, so we're investing this in you because you can't ever make somebody sign something that says, I won't leave here. You're saying, if I choose to leave, then I have a liability to pay you back.
after that's what they do.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I mean, if I'm going to invest in you, sure. What else is exempt from FIT? Qualified moving expenses. So if I move with my company and they come in and pay for my moving expenses, that's not going to show up on my W-2. And again, this doesn't apply to Montana at all, but like my son lives in San Francisco, and this is one of his benefits, is you get passes. I'm sure you get anybody that's traveled to a big city where you can drive in a certain lane in the city if you've got a sticker that shows that you're a commuter, and they pay for his sticker. So, and that's worth, $100 a month. Or they give him a toll pass because he goes over the Bay Bridge to and from, from Walnut Creek to San Francisco 4 times a week. Those kinds of things, you don't have to pay tax on those. Those are transit benefits.
What if somebody pays for your parking?
Again, there's a limit. I think it's higher than that. I think parking's up to $210 a month. He also gets that, yeah, because, and he's a Montana kid, so he's driving around in an F-150 in San Francisco, which I'm like, are you nuts? Everybody else here owns a smart car that, like, me and my dog couldn't both get into at the same time, and he's like, ooh, still got his Montana roots. It's like, where do you park that thing? You could live in it here.
Driving it.
I mean, I know, and it's like all the roads are like this or like this, and it's like, I mean, it really takes up like 3 parking spots in a place where you can't even find one. And like, that is just a silly purchase. But turns out he doesn't really care what I think. Okay, what else is exempt? Is there anything important in here? No. Ministers, public officials. No. Okay. All right. Here's some meat and potato stuff. What time do we have on your computers? 1:30. Okay. Let's take out our notebooks. We're going to do some calculations. Let me show you the theory, and then we'll do some numbers. So anybody have any idea what this actually means in real people's language that we've already talked about? Pre-tax salary reductions.
Stuff taken out of your salary prior to tax.
Yeah, like
Like the 401.
the 401k.
But you pay it later when you take the money out.
You do. So this is just a fancy way. You'll also see this called, if you want to put in your notes, just because this is business terminology. These are all interchangeable terms. Pre-tax salary reductions. Deferred compensation is another way of talking about this. Deferred comp. In other words, I'm not going to take that $200 extra a month right now. I'm going to put it away, and I'm going to defer that compensation until I'm 65. In other words, a retirement plan. 401ks, 403bs, and simples. So those are all sort of interchangeable words. There's a bunch of other ones, but I'm not going to go into them because they're a little more esoteric, and a lot of them are pretty old. These are the 3 that you're going to mostly see. These, when you see this, these little letters in apostrophe or in parentheses, those refer to a section in the Internal Revenue Code. So if you want to know everything you want to know about it, you go to the Internal Revenue Code, which is now 1 million pages. And you'd open it to section 401, subsection K, and it would talk all about these deferred comp plans. I saw Ted Cruz last night in Texas saying that one of the things he was going to do is institute a flat tax and abolish the IRS. And everybody clapped. Texans hate tax. And everybody clapped, and I thought, yeah, that's going to happen about the time pigs fly to the moon. I mean, these guys all sit, gals all sit up there and say things that it's like, sounds great, or not, depending upon which side of the fence you're on. But it's like, the reality is this, I mean, really? Flat tax and abolish the IRS, yeah. We have a 1,000,000-page code. A 403B is a 401k, but for a nonprofit. Same thing, but like that's what I have here, a 403B, because I work for the government. It's a nonprofit organization. My husband works for the youth homes. Same thing, 403B. These guys, we're going to have one of these when we do our project, our CLGL project, and it stands for Savings Incentive Matching Plan for Employees. Savings Incentive Matching Plan for Employees. And this is for under 100 employees. So it's billed as it's like a 401k for a small employer. There's not as many reporting regulations. They're not as hard to set up. There's not as much compliance. They're lower cost. So, like I said, there's a bunch of other ones, but these are the main ones you're going to see. Okay, what other kinds of pre-tax salary contributions are there? There's cafeteria plans. There's flexible spending plans, which are also called Section 125, again, from the Internal Revenue Code. And there's health savings accounts. And that's not even all of them, but I think these are the only ones our book covers. This is the only one that is exempt from all taxes. And I think we talked about this before. So on a flex spending account, I don't pay tax for what? What taxes am I exempt from? No FICA, no Fed, no SIP. I pay no taxes on this. All the rest of them, all of my deferred compensation, my cafeteria plan, my HSA, those are only exempt from what? FIT and SIP, income tax.
What's the flex spending?
A flex spending account is money that you take out of your paycheck and put away with a third-party trustee, and you can take it out and use it to pay for your dependent care and for your medical, dental, optical, pharmaceutical care. So it was huge. Like I had one the whole time I was raising kids. You have $1,000 a month daycare bill. You don't have to earn $1,500 to bring home the grand to pay the daycare. You earn $1,000, you take $1,000 out and pay the daycare. I mean, it would save me $5,000 a year in tax. It's huge. It's not generally, unless you've got chronic health issues. I've got a $600 a month pharmaceutical bill or something. And we'll do an example, but that's an overview of it. Okay, so now does everybody basically understand what I put here?
Do companies still do health savings accounts for the ACA?
Sure. You can only have a health savings account, though, if you have a high deductible plan. What is that?
No, your deductible is really high.
Yeah, like what would you call a high deductible plan for a single person?
Oh, I don't know.
Anybody have a guess? No, it's for out of pocket for 1 year. High deductible plan, and it changes every year. It's indexed for inflation. I think this year, high deductible for a single person is like $3,550, and for a family, it's like $7,100.
Are those like the catastrophic plans? Is that what those are?
They're not quite as high. Like generally, catastrophic or major med are $10,000 deductibles. So that means you're not going to get anything covered unless you've been in like a bad wreck or had major surgery or cancer care. Okay, But 3,550, that's still, you're paying for all your little bumps and bruises and straps and your pap smear and your mammo, da-da-da-da-da, that's all, you're still paying for all that out of pocket. Your blood draws.
So then you're eligible for health savings account if you have that.
If you have a high deductible plan, you can set up a health savings account. And a lot of employers are sponsoring those now and saying, you know what we'll do, Hannah, we used to have this really great policy and we paid 100% of the premiums on it, but we just can't afford that anymore. So what we're going to do now is buy a high deductible plan, but then we'll put an extra $50 a month into your HSA. Or we'll match you what you put in your HSA. The difference between an HSA and a flex is that a flex, you lose it at the end of the year if you haven't used it. An HSA rolls year to year to year. And if you don't ever use it, you can convert it to an IRA when you retire. So my husband's company's done that. They have 180 employees. They used to pay 100% of the premiums. They're in social service. They believed in that. It was part of their mission. At a certain point, it was like, we're going to go out of business if we keep doing this. So they changed the plan to a high deductible plan, and then the youth homes puts in X amount of dollars a month into this HSA. And if we don't use it, we can roll it over every year. And then when we turn 62, I think it is, then we can convert it into an IRA and use it for our retirement.
So you can only have health savings account if your employer provides health insurance.
No, you can set up your own HSA through a bank.
Oh.
But I'm just saying more and more employers are doing them as packaging those with high deductible plans to keep health insurance affordable. So here was what you were asking about, Hannah, contribution to an FSA. The employee puts pre-tax dollars into a trust account. So they take money out of their check, they send it to somebody else, like in Missoula, the big provider is Allegiance Benefit. And then I can take that, so they hold on to it, and I submit them a receipt from my daycare provider, and they cut me a check for the amount of that.
What do they get?
They get a fee per employee per month. So like, we don't actually have flex accounts here anymore, but we did for years. And I think the university paid like $350 per employee per month that was signed up, and there was, 2,000 employees used it.
Do they use your money like bank while they have it?
I can't answer that, but I would guess that they've got very, very strict rules, and that they have got to keep, because that money isn't theirs.
Right.
It's mine, waiting to be. Although, I don't know. So it's kind of on that same vein. It was sort of interesting. We're going to Seattle next month, and we booked an Airbnb, and they hit my credit card for it. And I just saw it a couple days ago. I'm like, oh my God, they already took that $475, and we're not going till the end of March. So they are using my money, because I can tell you who's I'm renting from isn't getting it till we check out.
Right.
So they're using that money. So,
Some
but
credit card companies, they hang on to it like sometimes 90 days before the actual.
oh my God, that's a lot of float to
somebody
play
comes
with.
down and swipes a card where I work, and then we don't actually get the money to the credit card until like 3 months. It comes directly out of that person's account.
Like
They've
that,
got it for
exactly.
90 days, they're using it to.
Exactly. Yeah, I was a little surprised at that whole Airbnb thing. This, I'm pretty sure, though, because it's such a high-level fiduciary responsibility that they can't play with the money. I'm pretty sure it's got to be like in a some sort of a trustee account. But that's a great question. Okay, so what kinds of things can be included in these plans? Your insurance, your medical reimbursement, group life, this is that first $50,000, dependent care assistance, right? This is your daycare, health savings accounts. The kinds of things you can't put in a cafeteria plan are the non-taxables that we talked about, the transportation, the education. This isn't, you don't need to memorize this slide. That's not as important. What I want you to know how to do is how to make these work. So again, this is your flex spending plan. These dollars do not have FIT or FICA withheld on them, They're forfeited if not used. HSA, if an employee has a high deductible health plan, they can contribute annually to an HSA to meet out-of-pocket medical bills. Their employer can also contribute, and you don't pay tax on that.
So like, when, I got off my dad's insurance when I turned 26, they, told me I was getting like $900 a month.
We're like, oh, goody. Let me get my checkbook.
There was no way I was doing that, but, so like, if I did that, I could do an HSA through the bank.
With the $900 plan, that's not going to be a high deductible plan. That's going to be like a premium level plan for a single, I assume, like pretty healthy guy.
Right.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, you've got to show proof that you've got that high deductible. Archers aren't really used. Don't worry about those. And tax deferred, and then I'm kind of going through a lot of words, I know, and then we're going to do some examples. But this is all in this big pool that I put up before of things that you don't pay tax on, things that come out of your paycheck pre-tax. So again, here's my 401k, 403b, my simple contributions to a tax deferred retirement account. What do those words mean again? Tax deferred. Pay later. I'm paying my tax later, and in the case of a retirement account, it's way later, right? You're sitting here in your 20s, you're talking about paying your tax 40 years from now.
You laugh.
Yeah, I purposefully looked over you.
Yeah.
Types of retirement plans, and again, with your retirement plan, that's not pre-FICA. You still have to withhold and match FICA. Also, there's an annual amount you can put in for any of these plans. It changes every year. It's indexed for inflation. I think for a 401k now it's somewhere around 18 grand a year. For a simple plan, it's like 14 grand a year. But once you hit a certain age, i.e. 50, then you can put in more every year. It turns out in America that a lot of, I can't remember what percentage of the population is, wakes up mid-40s and is like, oh shit, I haven't saved enough. Okay? That is not when you want to wake up and realize you've undersaved. That is not when you want to wake up and realize you've undersaved. You want to start from I will guarantee every single person here, when you go to work, you're going to be paying off student loans. You're going to be, trying to get, maybe upsize your home, or, we've all got things we're trying to do. Buy a car that actually runs every day. And you're going to say, I don't have any money to put away. I can barely make my bills. Beg, borrow, or steal, but figure out how to get in the habit of putting, even if it's as much as $20 a week away. My younger son lives in Washington, D.C., and he honestly is barely keeping food in his belly. That he's putting away $40 a paycheck into his 401k because his employer matches him. And I'm like, dude, you are throwing away $80 a month if you don't put in the amount your employer will match. He should be putting in more, but he actually would physically be hungry then, which would mean I would send him money. So I'm not willing to go that far. But really, whatever you can do, and the other thing is, too, that psychologically it's a big part of getting in the habit of saving for retirement, because it's a super easy thing with student loans and little kids and broken cars and, da-da-da-da-da, to say, that is not my priority, I'm going to take care of that later. And can I tell you what? You're going to wake up like most of the masses at 45 and be like, oh, my God. And you don't want to do that. So start early. That power of compounding interest over 40 years, tax-free, wow. Your $40 could well be $4,000 by the time you're 65. Okay, so let's just try an example of how this works. Now what time do we have? 47? Okay. Let's do a fairly straightforward one. Let's say I'm going to put some facts up here, so go down. And we're going to do an example of our friend Lucy, who earns, and again, yeah, these amounts look like good amounts, but then all of a sudden you do have student loans and 2 kids that are in full-time daycare. It doesn't end up translating. Earns $39,000 a year, paid bi-weekly. And she's got a, luckily her mom helps out because her daycare bill would be a hell of a lot more than this. But she's got somebody who kind of helps her out, so she's got a $4,000 a year daycare bill. And the IRS, it doesn't have to be a child if you're taking care of a parent or a disabled brother or whatever. It's called dependent care, somebody that's your tax dependent. And let's just say this isn't how you do it, but let's just say she pays FIT at 10%. You know what FICA is. What I want you to do is calculate her paycheck, or no, you know how to do this one. Calculate her paycheck, and then have her pay her daycare bill out of her paycheck and tell me how much is left over. And then I'll show you how it works with the flex.
There was bi-weekly.
Yeah. This thing isn't going up. So touchy. Huh. I can't get to any of the numbers. What did it say? 30, oh there we go, 39,000. And just set up the paycheck just like we did before, you know, gross, minus FICA, minus FIT, you know, all your taxes, gives you net. And set it up just like I do. Actually, she's going to be in a higher bracket at that amount of money. She's going to be 15%.
And she pays her daycare bill bi-weekly?
Well, we're acting like she is. Yeah, sure. My point is, I want you to tell me how much you think after she gets her paycheck and pays her daycare, what does she have left? This is without the flex, right? And again, this isn't really how FIT works. I'm just doing this for illustration purposes. So here's her paycheck, right? And then her daycare bill is how much? Yeah, $153.85. So when that's all said and done, 25, she's got $1,006.40 left, right? Okay, How does a flex work? Irritating. Where'd it go? Or did they change completely? How does a flex work then? A little bit different, which is we're going to have to do what?
Take that out before you can.
We're going to take the flex out here, and then what amount are we going to calculate FICA and FIT on? Yeah. So maybe we can just do like a little subtotal or something. And then calculate the FICA and the FIT on the subtotal, right? So see if you can figure out how much you think she's going to bring home if she has a flex account.
What's she putting in the, I don't know.
She's putting in the amount, she elects the amount for her dependent care.
Oh, for her, okay.
Yes, sorry, I didn't make that clear. You have to make an election every year. Sorry, that I didn't make that clear. Yeah, this is in fact her flex election. So then the last thing I want you to tell me is what does she save in a year by using a flex plan? What does she save? Did you figure that out already? Good girl. Okay. So 1,500 minus 153.85. Okay. So what's that? 1346.15. 1346.15. So why does an employer like this then? More complicated to run payroll. Does the employer like it? He does. He saves money. How come? Yeah, he pays less matching. 201.92.
So, if you go to like a weekend or whatever, you have to tell them what your annual contribution is going to be.
Your employer, yeah, they'll ask you, they'll come and do like a meet and greet with the employees. And you have to fill out an election on an annual basis. Now, for medical bills, or for daycare, that's fairly easy, you know, for most of us that worked full-time and da-da-da-da-da, and knew what our support system was, you know what your daycare bill is, roughly. The medical bills is tricky, right? I know we all get our teeth cleaned twice. I mean, blah, 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 blah. But nobody knows that your kid's going to go off the ramp and, you know, shatter his shoulder at Snowball. How did I come up with that example? I wonder. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I've got a $5,000 out-of-pocket shoulder surgery pin bill. You don't know that. So that kind of stuff you can't really run through Flex. What you can do is say, oh my gosh, I know my kid needs braces. And I'm going to have that done in January. And I've got the exact amount of the bill, and I'm going to run that through my Flex. Stuff you know. All right?
So, like, you know your daycare bill.
You know your daycare bills. You know you're going to get braces. You know you've got to get a crown on your tooth. You know your partner needs to have, you know, back surgery. You schedule those things early in the year. You do all your research, and you get the amounts. That's what you can put through Flex, and that can be huge bucks of savings. So Hannah came up to $910. Do we have? Can somebody verify that number? So we saved $34.85 a paycheck, 26 times. Yeah, $906.10. Yeah. The only thing, and this is why it's a tough thing sometimes to sell to employees. My paycheck, if I'm her, if I use the Flex, is this. Have I paid my daycare bill yet? No, they've taken out the Flex money and sent it to Allegiance. Now what do I have to do out of my paycheck? I've got to go pay my daycare bill and then get the money back from them.
What's that turnaround like?
But it's more paperwork. If you don't have somebody that's very astute with numbers, this is like, what do you mean? I'm getting less money and then I got to pay my daycare bill. And it's like, they're not going to understand this. So you've got to, you don't capture as much of the market as you should for the savings that it accrues to people. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I was a young parent, $1,000 a year was a lot of money. You know, it's like, heck yeah. Okay.
Where did you get the 906? I got lost.
I found the difference between my two paychecks
Okay.
for one pay period, and I multiplied times 26 pay periods. Alrighty, for Tuesday, okay, I'm going to shut down the recorder.